Yo, 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 what is UP? Everybody, Dre here from Dre Talk Sports, and I need you to sit down for this one because the Cincinnati Bengals just did something this offseason that half the league is still trying to process. And if you are a Bengals fan who has spent the last 3 years bracing for disappointment, I am telling you right now, this year feels different. Different in a way that should honestly make the rest of the AFC nervous. Because while everybody was busy talking about quarterbacks and coaching hot seats this spring, the Bengals front office was quietly assembling something that, on paper, looks like the missing piece to a championship puzzle they've been trying to solve since Joe Burrow was a rookie. And trust me, by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why the sports books are watching this team closer than almost anybody else in the AFC right now. Let's rewind, though, because you cannot understand the hype around 2026 without understanding just how ugly 2025 actually got. The Bengals finished 6-11, third place in the AFC North, missed the playoffs entirely. And look, on the surface, that's just a bad season. Teams have bad seasons. No big deal, right? Wrong. Because this wasn't a bad roster having a bad year. This was, according to multiple national outlets, one of the most talented offenses in football getting completely sabotaged by a defense that could not get a stop to save its life. Joe Burrow himself only suited up for 8 games last season, missing significant time yet again, and even with backup Joe Flacco stepping in and earning his first career Pro Bowl nod while filling in, throwing for nearly 2,500 yards with 15 touchdowns, it did not matter because this defense finished dead last in the entire league in yards allowed per play on both the ground and through the air. Dead last, not bottom 5, not bottom 10. Last place, full stop in the most basic efficiency measure there is. And here's the part that should make you furious as a fan. This wasn't a one-year fluke. By defensive efficiency metrics tracking the last 3 seasons combined, this unit has ranked among the very worst in the entire NFL. Not one bad year. 3. Back to back to back. So what do you do when you're an organization staring down that kind of failure for 3 straight years? You either keep running it back and hoping, or you make a move that says, we hear you, we see it, and we are done pretending this is fine. And that's exactly what happened. Because in one of the more stunning transactions of the entire NFL offseason, the Bengals sent their first-round pick, the 10th overall selection in the draft, to the New York Giants in exchange for defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence II. Let that sink in for a second. A former first-round pick, a Pro Bowl caliber interior force, a guy who by Pro Football Focus's own tracking has racked up the 6th most tackles of any defensive tackle in the league since he entered the NFL back in 2017 with 382 career pressures, good for 9th among all interior defenders over that stretch. They didn't wait around hoping a rookie would develop into that guy. They went and got the guy who already is that guy, and they paid a first-round pick to do it, which tells you everything about how seriously ownership is finally taking this defensive crisis. And they didn't stop there. This is where it gets fun, because insiders and beat reporters covering the team have made it clear this wasn't a one-move offseason. This was a full-on defensive overhaul from front to back. Cincinnati also brought in veteran defensive lineman Jonathan Allen, adding even more juice to a defensive tackle room that already includes B.J. Hill and T.J. Slayton Jr., the latter of whom quietly started all 17 games last season and posted a career-high 3 sacks in his first year with the club. Think about that room for a second. Dexter Lawrence, Jonathan Allen, B.J. Hill, T.J. Slayton. That is not a defensive tackle rotation anymore, according to people around the building. That's a unit deep enough that defensive coordinator Al Golden can rotate bodies all game long and never lose an ounce of freshness up front. And when you can keep guys fresh in the fourth quarter, when everybody else's front 7 is gassed, that's when splash plays start happening. That's when quarterbacks start seeing ghosts. But hold on, because I promised you a story with layers, and here's where the plot thickens. Adding Lawrence and Allen up front is one thing, but the Bengals also went out and added edge rusher Boy Mayfield to the pass rush mix, which matters more than casual fans realize once you understand what Cincinnati lost this offseason. Because here's a gut punch nobody's really talking about. The team moved on from Trey Hendrickson and Joseph Ossai this offseason. Yes, that Trey Hendrickson, one of the most productive pass rushers in the entire league over the last several years. Losing a player like that should, in theory, be a disaster for a defense trying to fix itself. So why isn't Bengals Twitter in full meltdown mode about it? Because the front office is betting, and I mean really betting, that internal development plus these new additions more than makes up the difference. Is that a gamble? Absolutely. Is it a smart one? We're about to find out, and honestly, that tension right there is going to be one of the storylines of this entire season. Now, here's where I need you to lean in, because this next part is the piece of the puzzle that decides whether this defensive turnaround is real or just an off-season mirage. It's not just about the new veterans up front. It's about whether the young guys the Bengals have been stockpiling on defense for 2 straight draft classes finally pop. Remember, this organization has been pouring premium draft capital into the defensive side of the ball for years now, trying to build a young, cost-controlled unit around Burrow's max contract. Linebacker Demetrius Knight Jr. and linebacker Barrett Carter both returned for their second seasons after starting as rookies last year, and both flashed real production. Knight played in all 17 games with 14 starts, piling up over 100 tackles, 7 passes defensed, 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and 2 interceptions. Good enough to earn back-to-back Rookie of the Week nominations. Carter matched him blow for blow, also playing all 17 games and finishing with 102 tackles of his own. The question, and this is a real question, not just hot air, can Knight and Carter take the leap from solid rookie tackle numbers to guys who consistently make winning plays? Because there's a difference between being around the ball and being the reason the ball changes hands. And it's not just the linebackers getting a facelift. The secondary just went through arguably its biggest transformation in years, and this is a piece of the puzzle a lot of national coverage has slept on. Cincinnati went out and signed safety Brian Cook, plucking him right out of the AFC as one of the top available safeties on the open market, and paired him with former Patriots captain Kyle Duggar. According to Pro Football Focus, Cook has missed only 9 tackles across the last 2 seasons combined, and Duggar missed a mere 3 tackles in 700 defensive snaps last year. 2 of the surest tacklers at the position in all of football, now roaming the same secondary. That's not a minor upgrade, that's a philosophy change. This defense wants to stop bleeding missed tackles into explosive plays, and they went out and bought 2 proven answers to that exact problem. And then there's the Dax Hill of it all, because this might be the most important quiet storyline of the entire offseason. Hill, the former first-round pick who moved from safety to cornerback a couple years back, tore his ACL in October of 2024, fought back from it, and by week 9 of last season, once he was locked in full-time at outside cornerback, he ranked 14th among all cornerbacks league-wide in yards allowed per coverage snap, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. His running mate DJ Turner, playing opposite him, ranked 7th. Head coach Zach Taylor came right out and said Hill's best position is outside corner, and the Bengals have committed to keeping him there permanently in 2026 rather than bouncing him all over the formation like they did in years past. Turner and Hill combined for 29 passes defensed last season, not far off the 32 that the Houston Texans shutdown corner tandem of Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter produced. And if you know anything about defensive back play, that's the kind of number that gets people's attention. The one battle still up for grabs heading into camp is the slot cornerback job, with names like Josser Taylor and rookie Takario Davis in the mix, and that competition alone is worth watching all August. Now, before we get to the offense, I want to address something that's been all over social media the last few weeks, because the fan base reaction to this defensive overhaul has honestly been split right down the middle, and both sides make a point worth hearing. Half of Bengals Twitter is out there posting highlight reels of Dexter Lawrence collapsing pockets in New York, celebrating like the Super Bowl's already been won in July, and I get the excitement, I really do. But the other half is pumping the brakes hard, pointing out that this same front office has burned fans before with off-season hype that never translated to January football. And that skepticism isn't irrational, it's earned through 3 straight years of watching promising rosters implode. Local sports radio down in Cincinnati has been having the exact same argument on loop for weeks now. Some hosts calling this the most talented roster of the Burrow era, others reminding everybody that good on paper in July has been the story of this franchise for 3 years running. Here's my honest take, and I'll give it to you straight instead of just picking a side to farm engagement. Both camps are right about something. The talent addition is real, and it's substantial. But talent alone hasn't been this team's problem before. Cohesion and health have been, and no amount of offseason transactions fixes that until the games actually get played. So temper the extremes on both sides, because the truth, as usual, is living somewhere in the middle of that argument. Okay, let's pivot because I promised you this was going to be a roller coaster, and we haven't even gotten to the fun part yet, the offense. Buckle up, because according to people who watch this roster closely, this might be, and I want you to hear me say this clearly, this might be the best offensive roster of Joe Burrow's entire career. Not good, not top 10, potentially the best it's ever going to look on paper. And here's why that matters so much. Burrow is entering his 7th season in Cincinnati, squarely in what a lot of analysts consider a quarterback's second major career peak, that stretch in the late 20s where accumulated experience, weapon continuity, and physical prime all collide at once. We already saw the first peak. We're watching the second one unfold in real time, and this time, for the first time in a long time, he's not walking into a locker room full of question marks. He's walking into continuity. And when I say continuity, I mean it in the most literal sense possible. This offensive line is coming back completely intact. All 5 starters. That almost never happens in the NFL, where injuries and cap casualties chew through offensive lines every single offseason. Left tackle Orlando Brown Jr., who's under contract long-term to stay in Cincinnati, is back anchoring the blind side. Rookie guard Dylan Fairchild, who by Pro Football Focus's own grading posted the 4th highest overall grade among all rookie offensive linemen last season with at least 100 snaps, and the 2nd highest pass blocking grade in that entire class, returns for year 2. And if you know anything about offensive linemen, year 2 is typically when things start clicking. Ted Karras is back at center, and depending who you ask, he might be one of the most underrated pass-protecting veterans at his position in the entire league, the guy that quietly makes sure protections are called correctly before the snap even happens, with enough experience and leadership to make Karras' presence worth far more than his box score numbers. Dalton Reisner is back at right guard after grading out, per PFF, as a legitimate top 25 guard in football last season with a 72.3 overall mark. And then there's Amarius Mims at right tackle, who logged the 11th most pass-blocking snaps of any tackle in the NFL last year in just his 2nd season, 694 of them. And folks, if you are sleeping on Amarius Mims heading into year 3, you need to wake up immediately, because the trajectory on that guy suggests he is about to become a problem for opposing pass rushers for the next decade. Burrow himself said it best this offseason, having the same 5 up front again means you're not stuck with young guys trying to learn the communication on the fly. That's not just a nice quote. That's an actual competitive advantage most teams in this league simply do not have. So think about what that means for Joe Burrow. A fully returning offensive line, now with even more depth added through the draft in center Connor Lew out of Auburn and tackle Brian Parker II out of Duke. A number 1 receiver in Jamar Chase entering his physical prime at 26 years old, and if you don't know what that means for a wide receiver, that is the peak. That's the age range where the elite ones separate from the merely good ones. T. Higgins still there as a legitimate number 2 who'd be a number 1 anywhere else in the league. A pass-catching tight end room that insiders are calling one of the most versatile in the entire NFL. And a running back in Chase Brown who just posted back-to-back 1,000-yard scrimmage seasons, catching a career-high and franchise record 69 passes out of the backfield last year, good for 5th among all running backs league-wide, all while entering this year in a contract year, which, and you already know this if you've watched this league for more than 5 minutes, contract years have a funny way of turning good players into great ones for exactly 1 season. Coincidence? I'll let you be the judge. But here's the twist, and this is the part where I have to be honest with you instead of just hyping you up, because that's what separates this channel from the noise. None of it matters if Burrow isn't on the field. And I need you to really sit with that sentence, because the numbers back it up in a way that's honestly a little scary. In the seasons where Burrow has played 16 or more games, this offense has been an absolute video game, over 4,600 passing yards with a stacked touchdown to interception ratio in 2021, similar monster numbers in 2022, and an unbelievable 43 touchdowns against just 9 interceptions in 2024. 43-9. That's not just good, that's some of the cleanest, most efficient quarterback play in the modern NFL. The problem has never been Joe Burrow's talent. The problem has been keeping Joe Burrow healthy and upright long enough for that talent to show up on the scoreboard consistently across a full season. So when I tell you this offense could be historically good, understand the entire equation hinges on one single variable: health. That's the suspense. That's the tension hanging over this whole season before a single snap has even been played. Now let's talk numbers, because Vegas has officially entered the chat, And what's happened with this team's win total over the last few months is honestly one of the more fascinating storylines of the whole offseason. Back in February, right around Combine season, Cincinnati's win total opened at 9.5 games, evenly priced on both sides, which tied them for just sixth among AFC teams, behind the Ravens, Bills, Chiefs, Chargers, and Patriots. Not exactly a ringing endorsement for a team many fans believe is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Bengals director of player personnel Duke Tobin came right out publicly this offseason and basically admitted the obvious, that this team needs to find ways to win the games it should win instead of letting them slip away, which, if you watch this team blow winnable games over the last 3 seasons, you already knew that in your soul. But here's where it gets interesting. That number hasn't stayed put. Money has poured in on the overall offseason long, to the point where several sportsbooks now have Cincinnati sitting at minus 150 or better just to clear 10 wins, and multiple professional handicappers have publicly said that 9.5 feels far too low given everything this front office just did on both sides of the ball. One writer covering the futures market flat out said the market is undervaluing a team that fortified its offensive line depth, revamped its defensive line, and completely retooled its secondary in the same offseason. That's the kind of quiet steam that usually means something big is coming. And it's not just the betting market, actual national writers are starting to call their shot publicly. Fox Sports' Eric Williams put out one of the boldest post-schedule release predictions of the entire offseason, going as far as to predict a deep playoff run for Cincinnati, pointing to the fact that the Bengals have the third easiest schedule in the entire league this year, based on projected opponent win totals. It's finally Joe Burrow's time to shine again, Williams wrote. And look, I don't throw around agreement with hot takes lightly, but that line hits different when you actually look at what's been assembled on this roster. Now, before you get too excited, I have to be the honest voice in the room here for a second, because here's the sobering counterpoint that's fair to bring up. The Bengals had one of the easiest schedules in the league last year, too, and they still finished 6-11. So, an easy schedule alone means nothing if health and defensive improvement don't show up alongside it. That's not me being a downer, that's just me keeping you grounded before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about the schedule itself for a second, because this is where things get spicy, and where the Bengals are about to have some moments that could genuinely define the entire narrative of their season. This team is heading overseas for an international matchup, taking their talents to Madrid for a Week 9 showdown against the Atlanta Falcons, which is wild when you think about Bengals fans potentially planning European vacations around a football game. But hey, that's the modern NFL for you, going global. Closer to home, Cincinnati opens the season hosting Tampa Bay in what's become a beloved Cincinnati tradition around the home opener called Open in Orange, presented by Kroger, and then things get real physical fast. This team plays the Battle of Ohio against Cleveland not once but twice, in Week 13 and again in Week 18, and if you know anything about that rivalry, those games get chippy no matter what either team's record looks like. There's a Monday Night Football trip to Washington against the Commanders in Week 11 that's going to get a ton of national eyeballs. And then, in one of the most anticipated home dates of the year, the Bengals host the defending conference contender Kansas City Chiefs for the 4th straight year of their Stripe the Jungle event on December 13th, where Paycor Stadium turns into an absolute sea of orange and black. And if you've never seen that atmosphere in person, according to fans who have, it is unlike anything else in the league. Throw in a Sunday Night Football date against Pittsburgh on November 15th, where the Bengals are expected to break out their white Bengal alternate look, one of the franchise's most iconic uniform traditions, and you've got a schedule absolutely loaded with primetime moments where this team is going to be under the brightest lights in football, for better or worse. Cincinnati also gets 9 games this year against teams starting brand new head coaches for the first time, which analysts have flagged as a real structural advantage, given how much continuity Cincinnati itself is carrying into camp compared to the rest of the league. And look, I already know what the comments section is going to say because I read this stuff religiously. Some of you are going to say the offensive line is still the problem, that Orlando Brown is a liability, that this group can't hold up in the biggest moments. I get it. That's been the popular narrative for years around here. But when you actually go back and watch this line play, and when you look at what independent grading services are saying about Fairchild's rookie pass blocking numbers and Mims's snap counts, that narrative is starting to look outdated. The real concern, if I'm being straight with you, isn't the starting 5, it's the depth behind them. Because if one of those five goes down for an extended stretch, this roster does not currently have a fully proven answer waiting in the wings. That's a real risk. That's not fear-mongering, that's just math. Keep an eye on names like Cody Ford and Jalen Rivers, along with rookie depth pieces added through this year's draft class, because if health becomes an issue up front, those are the guys who are about to get thrown into the fire. Here's where I want to bring in the historical comparison, because this is the part of the story that gives me chills every time I think about it. This 2026 setup, the vibe, the energy, the feeling in the building, insiders and longtime observers of this franchise keep drawing the same parallel over and over again. This feels like 2021 all over again. Back then, you had a young quarterback coming off a lost rookie season, paired with an electric new receiver everybody was excited about, on a roster that the national media was severely underestimating heading into the year. And what happened? That team went to the Super Bowl. Now in 2026, you've got a similar setup, a roster loaded with continuity, a defense that's been retooled with real difference makers instead of just draft and pray hope, and a national perception that still hasn't fully caught up to how good this team could actually be, as evidenced by that stubborn 9.5 win total sitting there like an insult. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, and I want to be clear that's my opinion, not a guarantee, but when the ingredients start looking this familiar, you'd be a fool not to pay attention. So where does that leave us? Let's talk stakes, because this is where the pressure question gets interesting, and it's not where you'd expect it to be. A lot of fans want to put all the pressure on head coach Zach Taylor, and sure, at some point that's fair, but insiders close to the situation have suggested the organization itself feels like it's finally done its job this offseason. They went out and got Dexter Lawrence, they got Jonathan Allen, they rebuilt the safety room with Cook and Duggar. They kept the offensive line together. They surrounded Burrow with continuity on offense for the first time in years. At a certain point, the front office has done what it can do from a roster building perspective, which means, and this is just my read on it, the pressure this year shifts almost entirely onto the players themselves. Can the defense's new veterans mesh quickly with a young core that's still figuring itself out? Can the second-year linebackers take the leap from promising to proven? Can Dax Hill stay healthy and build on that strong late-season finish at outside corner? And above everything else, can Joe Burrow simply stay on the field for 16, 17 games? Because here's the brutal truth hanging over this whole preview, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't say it plainly. This roster, on paper, right now, in July, looks like a Super Bowl contender. Full stop. That is not hyperbole for clicks. That's genuinely where a lot of credible analysts, insiders, and now even the betting markets shifting money have this team pegged heading into training camp. But we've been burned before as fans of this sport, and looks like a contender on paper and actually wins games in January are two very, very different sentences. What happened next in each of the last few seasons shocked everyone in the worst possible way. An injury here, a defensive collapse there, and this fan base has scar tissue from watching a talented roster fail to close the deal over and over again. Remember, this franchise has hit double-digit wins only a handful of times in its entire history, and the record for regular season wins in a single year sits at 12, a mark reached in exactly 4 seasons across the franchise's whole existence. That context matters. Getting back to double-digit wins isn't just a nice storyline, it's genuinely rare for this organization historically, which is exactly why this offseason's aggression matters so much. But here's the thing that's got me fired up heading into this season more than I have been in years. For the first time since 2021, I genuinely do not know where the fatal flaw is on this roster. Go ahead, try to find it. The offensive line is fully intact and improving. The receiving core is elite. The quarterback, when healthy, is a top 5 talent in the entire sport. The secondary just got a legitimate infusion of proven tacklers and a cornerback finally locked into the role that suits him best. And the defensive tackle room, for the first time in 3 years, added proven, established difference makers instead of just hoping rookies figure it out on the fly. Is there risk? Of course there's risk, health risk, depth risk, the risk that a retooled defense takes time to gel on the field instead of just on paper. But risk is different from an obvious glaring weakness, and for years this team has had an obvious glaring weakness. This year, I'm having a hard time finding one, and that, more than any single stat or signing, is exactly why I'm telling you right now, circle this Bengals season, because it has all the ingredients to be one of the most memorable in franchise history, one way or another. One more thing before I let you go. Because it's the question I keep getting asked in the comments on every single Bengals video I've posted this summer. What does a realistic worst case scenario actually look like here? And I owe you honesty on this one too. The worst case isn't some exotic collapse. It's the same boring, heartbreaking script this fan base has lived through before. Burrow goes down for a meaningful stretch again. The new defensive pieces need real time to gel under a newish scheme identity, and a genuinely talented roster limps to another 8-9 or 9-8 finish that leaves everybody arguing about coaching seats all over again. That outcome is absolutely on the table, and anybody telling you it isn't is selling you something. But the best case scenario is sitting right there too, close enough to touch, a healthy Burrow, a defense that finally plays up to its talent level instead of down to its recent history, and a Cincinnati Bengals team making the kind of run this city has been dying for since February of 2022. The gap between those two outcomes isn't talent, it's health, continuity, and whether all these new faces on defense come together faster than anybody's expecting. That's the whole season, right there in one sentence. All right, that is going to do it for this preview, but I promise you this is only the beginning of the conversation, because once training camp battles start heating up and preseason reps start rolling in, we are going to be right back here breaking down every single development as it happens. The slot corner competition, the offensive line depth battle, every single Joe Burrow rep in that building. If this video got you fired up, if you agree, or if you think I'm completely off base and want to tell me why in the comments, smash that like button right now. Drop your take down below, because I read every single one of them, and if you are not subscribed to Dre Talk Sports yet, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, because we've got no-filter breakdowns, insider reports, and deep dive analysis coming all season long, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Bengals fans, 2026 is about to be a ride. Let's go.